Okay, here we are with Chapter 28 and Chapter 29, Section 3, which is the West Between the Wars, and then Chapter 29 is about China, how that's important leading up to World War II. So for now, Section 1, we're going to talk about instability after World War I in Europe. It's a mess, right? Europe was destroyed by the Great War, the war to end all wars, right? World War One. So there's a lot that's going to need to happen for recovery of everything. So we'll talk about that. We're going to identify the effects of the Great Depression on government and politics. Okay, the Great Depression doesn't just affect the United States; it affects the whole world during this time, and it has an equal effect on everybody during this time. So. Okay, some problems of the interwar years. That just means the years between the First and Second World War. So from 1919 until 1939. So these 20-year period here. The Treaty of Versailles in the U.S. Okay, the Senate refused to ratify the Treaty of Versailles, so the United States could not join the League of Nations. And that was kind of Wilson's big thing, was to get this League of Nations passed, Woodrow Wilson, the president. But when he was out trying to campaign for it and get support for it, he had a stroke and he died from that. So he was never really able to get people on board with it. The Senate was not happy about it, and in the United States, the Senate has to sign the treaty, and then it becomes official. People in the U.S. wanted to avoid any continuing involvement in European affairs. We wanted to isolate ourselves. Okay, this is called isolationism, this idea. We just want to stay out of Europe's fighting. We'll still trade with them and things like that, but we don't want to go over there and fight. We want to stay out of that. Now, the League of Nations was pretty weak. Without the U.S. support, who was kind of the major player in this, it was never really able to take off because the other countries, it wasn't really their idea to do it, so they didn't really want to do it. It proved to be ineffective in maintaining peace, and it will not be until after the Second World War that we will get a body that will be able to do this with the United Nations, which was created in 1948. Okay, war reparations, or reparations, however you want to say it. France demanded war reparations from Germany. They really wanted the Germans to pay. In accordance with the Treaty of Versailles, it sent troops to occupy the Ruhr Valley when Germany could not pay. So Germany, their money is worthless. We talked about this before. And so what's going to happen is the French, well, they're just going to send a bunch of military people and just stand along the border, basically, and say, well, if you don't do anything, we got all these soldiers here, and we'll come and rough you up, basically type deal. The French really wanted them to pay, so did the British, the United States. They did, but they were nicer about it in the end. Now, Germany, to pay their salaries, they printed more money, which led to inflation and the worsening of an already difficult economic conditions. They tried to print more and more money, but it got to the point where the inflation was so bad that the money was worth more to burn than to spend. So it was worth more to put it in your furnace or on a fire than to actually use it to pay for things. That's the point where it got to. So the economy in Germany during this time is really, really poor. Now a couple treaties, and one treaty and one pact here. In the Treaty of Locarno, France and Belgium agreed to new borders with Germany. Basically, what they're trying to do is give Germany less land. They're going to take back the Rhineland, which is kind of that area that's been tossed around a couple times, and also France will also take back Alsace-Lorraine, which is a part of Germany and France that has been fought over for hundreds and hundreds of years during this time. But they're trying to make Germany small and defenseless and weak as best as they can because they do not want them to rise up again. Now, this 65 nations agreed to renounce war in 1928. This is the Kellogg-Briand Pact, I think that is what it was called. And basically, all these countries agreed to, Kellogg-Briand Pact. They agreed to not fight anymore, but since it's a pact and not a treaty, there's no way to enforce it. So basically, it's just like, yeah, okay, we promise, but that was pretty weak, and obviously because there's a Second World War. So, all right, now the Great Depression, economic downturn, obviously, of individual nations in the 1920s affected the worldwide economy. Because remember, the economy is now it's an international world economy. So everybody relies on each other, and when a few countries start to go down, everybody goes down with them. Okay, the Great Depression will hit the United States on October 29th, 1929. Is when the stock market will crash. That's just part of it. There's other parts of it too, but we'll talk about that next year. Prices for farm products fell rapidly due to overproduction. Okay, so there was overproduction and underproduction. There was overproduction and underconsumption. So basically, there's too much being produced and not enough people buying it, and as a result, when you have too much supply and not enough demand, prices are going to go down. Okay, that's basic economics. The stock market was another reason. Okay. American investors stopped making loans to Germany so they could invest more heavily in the U.S. stock market. After the stock market crashed, and it crashed because, well, basically what was happening is they were giving out loans. They were giving out loans, but not having anything to back them up. So when it came to paying them back, they couldn't actually do anything about it. It was a rough time. But anyway, investors continue to divert money from Germany, take away, causing banks to fail during this time. Now, you have democracy versus authoritarianism. Okay, authoritarianism is a very important word that will be used here for the rest of the year. Okay, now, millions lost their job, giving rise to increased government intervention in the economy and making many people willing to cede control to dictators with simple solutions. So democracy at this time was not working. Okay, democracy is not working. So we're going to have authoritarianism, which is basically you're going to have a dictator come in and they're going to do whatever they want. Okay, you have authoritarianism, and then that will eventually turn into totalitarianism. We'll talk about that later with the dictators. For section 2, probably. Okay, now Germany, the Great Depression paved the way for public fear and the rise of extremist political parties. That would be the Nazis. The popularity of the Weimar government plunged. The Weimar government was the government that was put in place after World War I to try to come in and fix it. It was awful. The Weimar Republic didn't last very long. It only lasted like 10 years, I think, something like that. But people didn't like it because they weren't fixing any solutions. So then some hotshot named Hitler comes in and says he's going to fix the whole place, and that's another story for another day. Okay, in France, they have a democracy. Their French government reorganized repeatedly. This is when they have their revolving door government. This is the Third Republic now of France. And offered workers new rights such as collective bargaining and minimum wage. Okay, that's a plus. This is also something that happens in the U.S. Collective bargaining is when you can go in and negotiate with a neutral party coming in to help kind of bridge the gap and hear both sides and stuff like that. Okay, and then in Great Britain, another democracy, uh, there were balanced budgets and protective tariffs with the new conservative government's economic policies, and they proved relatively effective in combating the Great Depression. The Great Depression actually didn't hit Britain as much for a few reasons. One, they're kind of on their own, right? They're on an island, and so they're more self-sufficient, whereas other European countries rely on each other. The continental part of Europe, they all rely on each other, so they kind of had a tougher time. But having a better budget, and then the tariffs are when you tax imports. So by doing that, that was also a plus to get that done. So I believe that's the end of this section. Yes. Okay, so we got section 2 tomorrow, which is the rise of dictatorial regimes. But just know the Great Depression, okay, it was rough, not only in um, the U.S. but in Europe as well. World War I was devastating. You could still go to Europe today and see the damage from the First and Second World Wars. Okay, the First World War ended over 100 years ago now. Okay, so it's crazy to see that, but it takes a while. Even when these dictators rise to power, it's still not the best, and um, the Great Depression really does not end until World War II kind of gets rolling. Like even in the United States, all the stuff that was happening was good, but once World War II happens and the U.S. gets involved, it's very much a big factor in turning around the economy. Same in Europe, because after this, in the 1950s, um, Europe is going to change real quick. This World War II was way more devastating than World War One because it involved a lot more countries and a lot more technology and fighting, but we'll get to that. So anyway, the Great Depression, tough times after World War One. All right, so we got section 2 coming up next time.